Hi, friends. Glad you're here. Let's dive into today's story. You're lucky we even let you inside. Elena, try not to embarrass us with that cheap suit. That was the greeting I got from my own brother, Julian, the moment I handed my coat to the valet. He didn't hug me. He didn't say hello. He just looked me up and down with that familiar sneer, the one that had defined my entire childhood, and pointed toward the back of the room. Stay near the buffet. Don't talk to the investors. I'm Elena. I'm 32 years old, and 3 weeks ago, at a vineyard in Napa Valley that cost more to rent for one night than I supposedly make in a year, I watched my family toast to my mediocrity. Julian was the star, the golden child, the VP of sales, the one marrying into a political dynasty. I was just the background noise, the family failure, the sister who dabbles in numbers while the adults do business. They laughed when Julian grabbed the microphone and made a joke about my little bookkeeping hobby. My parents clinked their crystal glasses, beaming with pride at their son's cruelty. They loved the narrative Julian the conqueror, Elena the charity case. But here is the painful paradox that kept me standing there, gripping my glass of sparkling water until my knuckles turned white. They didn't know that the bookkeeping hobby they mocked was actually a high-level forensic accounting firm. They didn't know that the massive merger Julian was celebrating the deal that was supposed to make him a millionaire had only gone through because I was the anonymous auditor who cleaned up their messy ledgers weeks ago. And most importantly, they didn't know that the man standing next to Julian, his terrifying, no-nonsense CEO, had spent the last 48 hours desperately trying to hire the person who flagged the discrepancies in Julian's department. Julian thought he was introducing his pathetic sister to his boss to get a cheap laugh. He had no idea he was actually introducing the executioner to the condemned. They thought I had lost everything, but they didn't know the game had only just begun. Like this video if you hate hypocrites who smile in your face while stabbing you in the back. To understand why that moment at the vineyard burned so hot, you have to understand the 20 years of ice that came before it. In the distorted gravity of the Vance family, Julian was the sun burning bright, demanding all the oxygen and blinding everyone to his flaws. I was just the cold, distant planet orbiting silently, useful only when gravity needed to be balanced. Growing up, the script was always the same. Julian broke the window. I was the one handed the broom to sweep up the glass because he has baseball practice. Elena, he needs to rest his arm. Julian failed algebra. I was forced to tutor him for 3 hours a night while my own AP projects gathered dust. When he got into a mediocre state college, my parents threw a block party that cost more than my first car. When I graduated summa cum laude with a double major in finance and criminal justice. My mother looked up from her magazine and said, "That's nice, honey. Did you remember to pick up Julian's dry cleaning?" But the real toxicity wasn't in the forgotten milestones. It was in the wallet. 3 months before the engagement party, my phone buzzed while I was in the middle of a forensic audit for a tech startup in Seattle. It was my mother, Linda. No hello, no how are you? Just a frantic demand that sounded more like a hostage negotiation. "We need a transfer, Elena, immediately." My stomach tightened. "Is Dad okay? Is it the house?" "It's Julian," she snapped, as if I should have known. "The deposit for the vineyard is due by 5 o'clock today. The wire from his bonus is delayed. If we don't pay, he loses the date. He loses the prestige." How much, I asked. already pulling up my banking app, conditioned like a Pavlovian dog to smooth things over. 15,000. I froze. Mom, that's not a small amount. Why doesn't he use his credit card or his fiance's family? Don't be crass, she hissed. We can't let them know he's liquid light right now. It's about optics. Elena, you wouldn't understand. Just send the money. He'll pay you back when the bonus clears next week. I sent it. Of course I sent it. I wired $15,000 of my hard-earned money into my brother's account to save his optics. Did the bonus clear next week? No. Did I get a thank you? No. Instead, I got an invitation to Sunday dinner 2 weeks later. I walked in expecting maybe a check, or at least a warm meal. What I got was a front row seat to the Julian show. My brother sat at the head of the table, pouring expensive Cabernet bought. I realized with a sick lurch, with the money I had likely freed up for him, and holding court. The venue is secured, Julian announced, swirling the wine like he was some European count. It took some arm twisting, but I made it happen. You know me. I don't take no for an answer. My father slapped him on the back. That's my boy, a closer, just like I was. I sat there, staring at my fork. Actually, I said, my voice quiet but cutting through the applause. The wire transfer made it happen. Did you bring the check? Julian. The room went silent, not the respectful silence of a church, but the annoyed silence of a movie theater when a baby starts crying. My mother sighed, dropping her fork with a clatter. Elena, please, not at the table. I just want to know when I'm getting the 15 grand back, I said, feeling the heat rise in my neck. It's been 2 weeks. Julian chuckled, a low, condescending sound that made my skin crawl. He looked at his fiancée, then at our parents, sharing a look that said, see, she's obsessed with pennies. You're so transactional, Elle, he said, shaking his head. It's family money. It all comes out in the wash. I'm closing the merger of the century next month. You'll get your little loan back with interest. God, you act like you're starving. Aren't you doing those tax returns for people? You should be fine. I'm a forensic accountant, I corrected, for the 100th time. I audit corporations. Right, bookkeeping, he dismissed, waving a hand. The point is, stop trying to ruin the mood. This is a celebration. We're talking about legacy here, not your petty cash flow problems. My father nodded, turning his back to me to refill Julian's glass. Let it go, Elena. Don't be jealous just because your brother is playing in the big leagues. Jealous. They thought I was jealous of a man who was funding his legacy with my savings. I looked around that table at the parents who adored him, the fiancé who believed his hype, and the brother who stole from me and called it charity, and I felt something inside me snap. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet, terrifying sound of a bridge finally collapsing under too much weight. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. I just picked up my purse, stood up, and walked out. Where are you going? My mother called out, annoyed. We haven't cut the cake. I'm going to work, I said without looking back. Someone has to pay for this wine. As I closed the front door, I heard them laughing. They thought I was storming off to sulk. They didn't know I was walking straight into the most dangerous audit of my life, because Julian was right about one thing he was working on the merger of the century. What he didn't know was that the acquiring company had hired me to tear their books apart before the deal closed. And I had just decided to start with the sales department. To most people, forensic accounting sounds like watching paint dry. To me, it's like reading a diary that someone thought they locked. Numbers don't have egos. They don't lie to protect their reputation. They just sit there, cold and absolute, waiting for someone to notice that 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 5, no matter how much a VP of sales wants it to. And Julian really wanted it to equal 5. The acquiring firm, Apex Capital, had hired me under my LLC's name, EM Analytics. They didn't know I was Elena Vance, sister of the target company's golden boy. They just knew I was the consultant who had exposed a Ponzi scheme in a mid-sized tech firm 3 months prior. They handed me access to the data room of Julian's company, Vanguard Logistics, with a simple instruction: find the rot before we write the check. I spent the next 3 weeks living a double life. By day, I was the struggling sister my family pitied. I drove my beat-up 2015 Honda Civic to my parents' house to help my mother stuff envelopes for the engagement party invitations. I sat there licking adhesive until my tongue felt like sandpaper, listening to her brag about Julian's upcoming promotion. He's going to be a C-suite executive. Elena, she chirped, sliding a gold embossed card into a cream envelope. He's creating generational wealth. You should really take notes. Maybe one day you'll find a nice man who can do the same for you. I just nodded, sealing another envelope. That sounds great, Mom. By night, I was dismantling that generational wealth line by line. My apartment wasn't the shoebox they imagined. 6 months ago, I had quietly put a down payment on a 2-bedroom loft in the Arts District, exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows, a kitchen that cost more than Julian's car. I didn't tell them. I didn't post photos on Instagram. When my parents asked where I was living, I gave them the address of my old, cramped studio and forwarded the mail. Why? Because if they knew I had money, the requests for loans wouldn't be requests anymore. They would be demands. But success has a cost, and mine was isolation. I sat in that beautiful, empty apartment at 3 a.m., bathed in the blue light of 3 monitors, fueled by espresso and anxiety. My social life was non-existent. My dating life was a series of canceled Hinge dates because I was too busy tracing wire transfers. And what I found in Julian's ledger was terrifying. It wasn't just incompetence, it was channel stuffing. Julian was booking sales for products that hadn't shipped, forcing distributors to take inventory they didn't need just to inflate his quarterly numbers. He was counting revenue from contracts that hadn't been signed yet. He was building a house of cards on a foundation of quicksand, all to secure his bonus and impress Apex Capital. I saw the emails. Just sign it. Dave, we'll fix the dates later. Don't worry about the shipping manifest. I'll override it. His signature was everywhere. One Tuesday, I got a text from Julian. Hey, Elle, need a favor. Savannah's ring needs to be resized, and the jeweler is across town. Can you pick it up? I'm swamped with the merger prep. Big boy stuff. You wouldn't get it. I looked at the screen. Then I looked at the spreadsheet in front of me, where I had just flagged a transaction where Julian had categorized a $12,000 bachelor party in Vegas as client acquisition costs. Big boy stuff. Sure, Julian, I typed back. I'll get it. I picked up the ring. It was a 3-carat monster that cost more than my student loans. The jeweler handed it to me with a velvet pouch and a smile. Mister, Vance said to put the resizing fee on your card. He said his was maxed out from the deposit. My stomach dropped. He did it again. Of course, I said, my voice steady, though my hand shook as I handed over my Amex. Put it on mine. I walked out of that jewelry store and sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel. I could have called him. I could have screamed. I could have canceled the card. But I didn't. I needed them to think I was still the doormat. I needed them to think I was still the pathetic, pliable Elena who would pay the bill and cry in private. Because if they knew who I really was, if they knew I was the one currently drafting the red flag report that would land on the Apex CEO's desk in 48 hours, they would circle the wagons. They would hide the evidence. Julian would shred the paper trail. I needed him arrogant. I needed him careless. So I drove the ring to his penthouse. He answered the door in a tailored suit, holding a scotch. "Took you long enough," he said, snatching the bag. "Did you stop for coffee or something?" "Traffic," I lied. "Did you get the invoice for the resizing?" "Oh, yeah. Just Venmo request me. I'll get to it." He waved a hand dismissively. "Hey, are you still wearing that same blazer you know? For the engagement party, Savannah wants everyone in pastels. Try not to look so funereal." "I'll keep that in mind," I said. "How's the merger going?" He grinned, a predator who thinks he's at the top of the food chain. "Done deal. Apex is desperate for us. Their CEO, Sterling, is practically begging to sign. I'm going to be a legend." "Sterling," I repeated. "Right." I walked away, the sound of his door clicking shut echoing like a gavel. He didn't know that Sterling Elias Sterling, the CEO of Apex, had emailed me personally that morning. "EM Analytics. Your preliminary findings on the sales division are disturbing. If this is verified, the deal is off. I need a full breakdown by Friday. Name your price." I went home and worked for 36 hours straight. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I lived on adrenaline and a cold, hard rage. I cross-referenced shipping logs with billing cycles. I pulled IP addresses from the client emails that accepted the fake contracts and traced them right back to Julian's personal laptop. He wasn't just inflating numbers. He was forging the clients. When I finally hit send on the encrypted file, it was 5:00 a.m. on the day of the engagement party. The sun was just bleeding gray light over the city skyline. My eyes burned. My body ached. I felt hollowed out, empty in the way you only feel when you realize you've just executed your own brother. But then I checked my bank account. The $15,000 was still gone. The resizing fee sat pending on my credit card. The years of "you're not enough" echoed in the silence of my luxury loft. I stood up, showered, and put on the best suit I owned. It wasn't pastel. It was a sharp, slate gray power suit that cost $4,000 paid for with my own money, earned from my own skill. I drove to the vineyard not as the sister. I drove there as the auditor. They thought I was coming to eat their free food and sit in the corner. They didn't know that Elias Sterling had asked me to meet him there. He was attending as a guest of honor, unaware that the EM Analytics consultant he was emailing was the woman parking her Honda around the back so her family wouldn't see the valet tag. I walked toward the white tent pitched on the rolling green hills of Napa. I could hear the string quartet playing. I could see my mother laughing, champagne flute in hand. I could see Julian, chest puffed out, holding court. My phone buzzed. An email from Elias Sterling. Received the final report. I'm at the venue. Find me. I slipped the phone into my pocket. I took a deep breath of the expensive, grape-scented air. It was time to pay the tab. The air inside the white VIP tent smelled of expensive lilies and unearned confidence. I stood near a pillar, holding a glass of sparkling water that cost $12, watching my brother work the room. He was in his element, shaking hands, clapping shoulders, playing the role of the benevolent tycoon. To the untrained eye, Julian Vance was the picture of American success, a 30-year-old executive closing the deal of a lifetime, surrounded by a family that adored him. To me, he looked like a man standing on a trap door, jumping up and down to prove how sturdy it was. My mother found me first. Of course she did. She moved through the crowd like a heat-seeking missile in beige silk, her eyes scanning my outfit with immediate disapproval. "Elena," she hissed, gripping my arm with a strength that belied her fragile appearance. "I thought we discussed the dress code. This is a celebration, not a board meeting. You look severe." I came straight from the office. "Mom," I said, my voice calm. I didn't have time to change into pastels. "Always working," she sighed, adjusting my lapel as if I were an unruly child. "Well, try to blend in. Julian is very stressed. He doesn't need you hovering around the important guests with your intensity. Just stay by the raw bar. And for heaven's sake, smile. You look like you're auditing the shrimp." I almost laughed. "Maybe I am." She frowned, not catching the irony. "Just don't ruin this. Sterling is here, the CEO. If Julian lands this, everything changes. For all of us." "For all of us," I asked, "or just for Julian?" She didn't answer, just patted my cheek with a condescending pity that burned hotter than a slap. "Try to be happy for him. Elena, it's not his fault your life is so small." She floated away, leaving me standing there with the taste of copper in my mouth. Small. My life was small because I kept it clean. Theirs was big because they inflated it with gas. Then the music swelled. The string quartet shifted into a triumphant melody, and Julian stepped up to the microphone on the small stage. The room quieted. He beamed, raising a glass of champagne that, statistically speaking, was paid for by the vendor kickbacks I'd found in row 402 of his ledger. "Thank you all for coming." Julian's voice boomed, smooth and practiced. "They say success is a lonely road, but I've never felt that way. I built this division from the ground up with nothing but grit and integrity." I saw Elias Sterling standing near the back, his face unreadable. He crossed his arms. Julian didn't notice. He was too busy looking at his reflection in the room's adoration. "I want to thank my parents." Julian continued, gesturing to where my mom and dad were dabbing their eyes. "For teaching me that character counts, that you don't cut corners, and for always believing in me, even when the hours were long and the risks were high." He paused for effect. "And to my beautiful Savannah, we're building a legacy today, a legacy of honesty." The applause was polite, enthusiastic even. I felt nauseous. The audacity wasn't just in the lies, it was in the total erasure of reality. He wasn't just claiming success, he was claiming virtue. He was stealing the moral high ground while standing on a mountain of fraud. That was the moment the sadness evaporated. The little sister who wanted approval died right there in that tent. What was left was the auditor, and the auditor had seen enough. I started walking, not toward the exit, toward Sterling. He was standing alone by a high-top table, watching Julian descend the stage. I moved through the crowd, my slate gray suit cutting through the sea of pastels like a shark fin. But before I could reach him, a hand grabbed my shoulder. Hard. I spun around. It was Julian. His face was flushed, his eyes bright with adrenaline and champagne. "What are you doing?" he whispered harshly, pulling me away from the center of the room. "I saw you eyeing Sterling. Don't you dare go over there and beg for a job. I'm not having you embarrass me by handing out your little business cards." I shook his hand off. "I'm not looking for a job." "Julian." "Then why are you here?" He sneered, his voice rising just enough to turn a few heads nearby. "You've been sulking in the corner all night like a dark cloud. I told you this is for the elite. Elena, these are serious people. You don't belong in this conversation." "I paid for the venue deposit." "Julian," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I think that buys me a spot in the conversation." He laughed. It was a cruel, barking sound. "Oh, my God. Are you still on the 15 grand? You are so petty. Is that why you're stalking